Ladies and gentlemen, especially to our online audience, welcome to the online exclusive. I am joined by the very charming, the very wonderful Tobias Henz, who is a junior partner at McKinsey, and we have a great conversation. In fact, we're going to swap around this way.
All right.
Because I want you to be the center of attention over here. First of all, before we get into the report, this is a startup event.
That's right.
There are tons of entrepreneurs here.
Absolutely.
Who probably would never dream of going into consulting.
Which is a challenge for us, but good for the economy, I guess. Overall, it's not too bad.
So the starting question is, why is McKinsey here?
Well, McKinsey is here because we as a firm, and I personally truly believe that the startup ecosystem in Germany is dearly needed and a great path to revolutionize our economy and make it fit for the next century. So I don't see any reason not to be here, quite honestly.
Absolutely. And on a personal level, when I graduated from college, my MBA, my first place I went to go apply was McKinsey.
And then what happened?
In New York City, and that was the dream, and I went through interviews and everything else. But along the way, I think everybody has a part to play because it is an ecosystem.
That's
we
right.
need the insights and the macro oversights that you are about to share. And some people have to work on the ground level to fix the little things here and there. And then we need the investors that can infuse the money to make it grow, and the educators to enlighten people. So everyone's got to do their part. And I guess while consulting is a beautiful thing, and I think something I would be capable of, entrepreneurship and what I do now is where my heart is. That's why we've got you, because you have been instrumental in this report. I'm going to sit and have a listen, and then we, online audience, you and me are going to have a conversation, because while Toby does have a report to share, it's really to start a conversation.
Absolutely.
And
yeah,
so,
sure.
Same as last time, but on a different Slido channel, you need to take your phone out, on the QR code that you should see on your screen, scan it, and then I am going to take your questions to Toby, because we have about 10-15 minutes of chat, but we have 30 minutes of time. And so feel free to bring your questions in, and Toby will take it. So with that, I'm going to leave the stage to you.
Absolutely.
I'll sit right over here.
Thanks so much, Dan. And thanks so much for having me at stage 2. I think it's awesome that you're doing this, and it's awesome that you're not only doing it here in the room, but also streaming it live, so a lot of people can participate very hopefully. So what we've done recently is we've drawn up a report with a bit of research, as we like to crunch some numbers and put a forward-looking perspective on what we believe entrepreneurship in Germany and by extension also in Europe could look like in 2030 if we now get certain things right. And I think the top line message here is we believe that while the ecosystem today is valuable and will be valuable if it just continues the way it does for the next 10 or so years, there's much more potential in there if we accelerate. And if we do that, and I'm going to talk about how we do that in a little bit, we can get to that large number on top, 2,300 billion market capitalization, which is, first of all, just a large number, but it's more than DAX 40, so the German stock market index has, by about roughly 20% overshooting it. So I think that's one of the large numbers. And the other large number is, I also believe that sort of in the entirety of startups in the ecosystem, from small to large, over the next decade, we can create something of roughly 1.4 million jobs, and thus become instrumental not only to the economy, but also to the people and their lives outside of the ecosystem, outside of our, oftentimes bubble of startups. And I think that's going to be the challenge now, to move, yes, capitalization up and create the value, but also then move ourselves, the startup ecosystem, in the middle of the society. Now, how can we get there? 2 major thrusts that we look at. First of all, we do think we need to and we can double the number of startups being founded annually. For comparison, that's going to get us on a comparable level then with the Netherlands per capita. And we also do believe that once a startup is founded, in growth, we can and should and must increase its likelihood to scale to a positive outcome by a factor of 1.5. If you look through the entrepreneurial funnel, that's going to get us onto a level with the US, and in some, that's going to get us to those numbers. Doubling the number of startups, 2,900 are founded each year roughly today, to doubling to 5,800. is going to get us, over the next decade, 41,000 additional startups. And there's clear ways to do that. Those 2,900 come from, we've benchmarked here what some people within Germany or outside of Germany are doing well at specific sources of startups. And you see that big largest bar down below, 1,350 startups annually, we believe, can come from universities if we get everyone, all universities, to the level of entrepreneurial activity that the top universities today already achieve in terms of startups per students. And that's why I think it's so damn important that we are here today and that you are doing stage 2 and that you're participating in stage 2, because that's exactly going to be the biggest lever for more startups in Germany and I believe by extension in Europe in the next decade. And then the other here are a lot about inclusion and diversity. We do see that there's way too few female founders, though if you ask men and women if they'd like to be an entrepreneur, roughly 50% of both genders answer yes. However, then if you go down to how many founders are actually female, it's 16% today, which is way underrepresented and way below what other countries achieve. Second bigger lever, non-academic backgrounds, we don't tap that talent pool enough by far. Age, we have a bias of the most successful founders are 45 years of age, though the most founders are 20 to 30 years of age. Yeah, so there's a point in getting more people that are a bit more experienced to also still go into an entrepreneurial path. And then last but not least, migration history. We have an underrepresentation of people in Germany that found that have a migration background. And then all in all, that's going to sum up to those almost 3,000 additional startups. And even if they were no more successful than the average startup is today, that's already going to add something around 500 billion to the market capitalization of the ecosystem. That's 3, 4, 5 Volkswagens, just to put it in perspective. And then the other thing, though, if startups are founded, you need to make them more successful. We see today that 1 out of 330 startups that are founded in Germany reach a long-term stable state. That's what we call sort of unicorn and beyond, oftentimes through an IPO. And comparing that to the US, they get to 1 in 200 or something like that. And that's a factor of 1.5, and there's really no reason why we shouldn't achieve that. The question is, how do we do that the German way? There's 2 main levers that we see, and there's 2 main groups of startups that we identify if you see them scaling through the funnel. There's a huge value generation from startups that actually sees fundraising after round A, B, or C, that you may think are not successful, but then we did a bit of a deep dive on a sample of startups and tried to figure out what they actually do 3 years after they stopped fundraising. Turns out half of them are still in business or have been acquired, thus have value generated that is not gone just because they don't turn up in your Crunchbase or PitchBook databases anymore. So that's a super important thing, which we call the new German Mittelstand. They oftentimes create more jobs than the hyperscalers. Actually, it's 15% of the value that they create, this new German Mittelstand. It's 30% of the jobs, and I find that especially interesting because, of course, those jobs come earlier than if you wait for a unicorn status, and they are somewhat more stable because, earlier enough than oftentimes the hyperscaling startups, they go into stable operations and profitable operations. Yeah, but then not to forget, of course, we also need those hyperscaling companies. Those hyperscaling companies will create 85% of the value, the remaining 85% from the 15% you see in the new German Mittelstand. And there the big lever is really 95% of the value generation of a startup, if it goes through hyperscaling, happens after Series C. So what we lack here in Germany still is the capital from within the German ecosystem to write the big checks for the big rounds, because there are startups out there that can go for these big rounds, and that's the one big lever, enabling the hyperscaling in the later rounds for the hyperscaling companies, hypergrowth companies, that will get us to a lot of the market capitalization. And then by 2030, we do dearly believe the startup ecosystem can be as valuable or even more valuable than what we have in DAX 40 today, and thus not only be a main driver of German economy going forward, but of the society as a whole. And with that, Dan, did you expect that?
Some of it, but not all of it. So this is going to be good.
You saw the slides before, right?
I did see the slides before. You're not supposed to tell people that. But let's have a chat about this, because obviously, Toby, you have presented the optimistic view of what should be and what could be.
That's right.
So let's start the conversation about what's holding us back, right? So why don't we have that over 1,500 startups coming out of colleges? Why don't we have more of the female founders? Why don't we have more of the migrant founders coming? There's hope, there's potential. What's preventing it?
Yeah, and I think the important thing here is to realize the journey of an entrepreneur starts super early in childhood with a society that fosters entrepreneurial mindset, both in formal education, be it your kindergarten or your primary school, but also in informal education and mindset that you get from the way that your parents are interacting with you. And I truly believe we need a mindset change there of entrepreneurs, people doing business in the very sense of the word, getting into a more positive narrative. Again, I think that can happen if we, yes, highlight the value, but also especially the jobs and the lives of people that we touch and the purpose that we have with all our companies. No one builds a company just to get some market capitalization 3 or 5 years out, but there's a purpose behind that. And that's the narrative to change early on. And then literally, if you look into the universities, I mean, a couple of the founding universities of stage 2, they show you how it's done. I think there's a lot of learning from lighthouse examples, and then we can get to those numbers.
On a personal level, I think one of the areas that seems to be underrepresented, even in the report, is the migrant founders. Because when you look across the ocean at, say, Silicon Valley, you see an incredibly high, a disproportionate number of the co-founders come from migrant backgrounds. And there's something about change and difference that creates new opportunities, right? So I'm coming out of India during a pandemic where everything has been digitalized out of necessity. And then I'm here in Germany and I'm surprised by the amount of cash still being passed around. Shocking, right? And so immediately I'm thinking, whoa, there's opportunities. Simple things like scanning and paying via PayPal. The technology exists. The adoption is not there yet, but it already exists. You don't have to invent anything. So I think there's something about coming from other places that also sparks for a lot of entrepreneurship. And I did see was the smallest part of where the growth potential is. I think it's kind of like 150 or something in the report over there. But in addition to education, what you mentioned, it starts early. Are there initiatives or ideas that you have seen done elsewhere that you kind of go, if we started doing more of this in Germany, terrible example, Shark Tank in the US, wildly popular. I think it's called something like Lion's Den here in Germany, right? But there's a Shark Tank equivalent, also popular, but maybe not to the same level as the US. And I would imagine there are people watching Shark Tank and going, I could pitch that. And I see more and more kids on the show pitching.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm suggesting you recommend, but are there things you have seen outside of Germany that you go, this can spark that growth that we're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. There's things outside of Germany, but I think that's the important thing. There are also things inside of Germany happening that we need to scale. Okay. If you look outside of Germany, you went through the question before and didn't answer it, on female representation, where I think other countries, by virtue of them being much farther along, including women in business life than we are already, they already transferred that to the startup ecosystem, right? Where in a corporate you would say you need a diverse hiring committee, otherwise you'll get into mini-me bias and just hire the same people again. You need the same thing in startups, honestly, and then that's the investment committees that the female founders will pitch to. I mean, there are situations where you have investment committees, all white males, and there's a female pitching a product for females, not going to get funding, no one's going to understand, And I think these kinds of things, other countries, the Netherlands, the Nordics, also in Europe, do much better, for sure. And I think we can learn from that, And then also within Germany, There's tons of initiatives starting. Startup Teens is one of the ones. There's Leaders for Climate Action, where startups actually go and take the responsibility. I think it's about scaling that, quite honestly.
Super. We got some questions coming in from the audience.
Perfect.
You ready for that?
Absolutely.
Super. Let's jump right into it. So, who in the startup ecosystem can make the biggest impact in getting to your 2030 numbers? Is it government? Is it investors? Is it universities? Corporates? McKinsey? So,
it didn't say McKinsey,
They
right?
did say. It said MCK.
Oh, yeah, okay. ...
Fair
enough.
I take that for McKinsey.
Fair enough. I thought you made that up.
No.
But okay, no, it's a great question, because I think the answer is all of them jointly. Yeah, we're not going to get to any of those numbers if government looks at founders and founders look at government, and government looks back at corporates, and corporates ask the consultants to do something. Quite honestly, it's about all of them working together. Right? I mean, founders for sure can feel enabled and empowered to just do it, but they're not going to solve it by themselves. The government, there's a couple of things in terms of easing regulations where it makes sense. There's, I mean, the things that have been talked about a lot of times, right? ESOP laws, the question of who can invest in VC asset classes. These kinds of things, but then also who buys from startups and takes the leap of faith to become a customer, right? Other countries are much more progressive also from public institutions to buy from young companies. We have a bit of a bias to hold back because everyone is afraid that something might potentially go wrong. I think it's all of the above, and then of course McKinsey, just because it actually said that, Dan, will try to play a role by breaking down what could be into concrete levers, where the numbers then actually will come from, and work in the ecosystem and offer our help and our support and coaching. For instance, some of the startups that will win here later today will receive coaching from us. So we're trying to do our part as well.
Do you have a thought on the question of talent? So it's a question that's come in. With the current funding wave, we see a lot of hyper-growth teams. How did they hire sufficient talent within a short amount of time? And they added, especially in cities that are not Berlin. So any thoughts on that? Has that been one of the areas you've identified as one of the challenges, is just a lack of talent, or attracting talent, or retaining talent?
Yeah, I mean, of course, once you go into hypergrowth, talent becomes a huge topic, for sure. I think there's two answers to that question. A, is the talent pool you're looking at wide enough and big enough? Yeah, I think still going to the diverse profiles that we're lacking in founders. That's also true in terms of entrepreneurs and teams that then stand behind those entrepreneurs. So encouragement is, widen your lens. Yeah, it doesn't always need to be your a WHU or whoever a student that does this. Yeah? But I mean, also as highlighted by the fact that here there's a lot of universities that wouldn't have been the usual suspects for a startup competition like that 10 years ago. Talent pool is way bigger than some of us think. Yeah? And then the question of hiring internationally, for sure, especially in Corona times where hybrid teams do work, it becomes a topic more and more. And I mean, let's see what happens the next couple of years also politically, but I have a bit of a hunch and a hope that some things will be eased there, and we'll see more inflow into talent. I think we all can start promoting Germany and Europe as a great place to be and to work for startups, and then we'll get the talent in, hopefully, though of course it's not easy. I think a question or a story that someone told me yesterday is you got to figure out why people actually work for you. And could work for you. And I think large corporates have been doing that, data-driven now quite a while, and realized that in India you got to source people with the different messages versus if you still want someone in the valley versus have someone in Berlin or Munich or something like that. So I think that's the other encouragement there, right? Be creative with the messaging that you go out there and communicate your purpose and how they can connect to it.
As a global player who has recently moved to Germany, although I've been working here for 5 years, I've only now moved. I quite like this next question that came in from Anonymous. All of these are anonymous. So this question that comes in is, what are the main differentiating factors for the German startup ecosystem compared to the UK or the US?
Yeah. I love it, and by the way, I'd also like your perspective on that one as an international one.
Sure.
Again, forward-looking, what we believe is uniquely German is this new German Mittelstand that we talked about. The Mittelstand, the small and medium enterprises, if you want to translate it like that, have been a pillar of the German economy for quite a bit, well cited, well written about, and we believe that for the German startup ecosystem to be successful, we need the new German Mittelstand in terms of more jobs for value and whatnot. That's one of the things. Another thing is that we see that's not unique to Germany, but maybe to Europe, B2B business models work especially well. Yeah, well, there's of course a lot of merit in the B2C models that are driven here. There's of course also a small market to start with, and then Italy already has different tax regulations and whatnot, and you run into all these kinds of discussions. So B2B businesses work a lot in the topics that we traditionally are strong in. There's a lot around AI for automotive and industrials, as automotive industrials are some of the large companies here and large industries here. Will you find partners for our cooperations, talking about the session that you guys had here before I joined. Going for topics that we can credibly go for, anything around green tech for sure. Yeah, I think we as Germany, we want to be leaders in the climate revolution. Why not transfer that to the startup space and really push these topics? Yeah, and then last but not least, I also believe what's unique to Germany's economy today is what we call the soziale Marktwirtschaft, the participation of all employees, owners, and all the people to have a kind of fair social economics. And the question is also, do we get that transferred into the startup ecosystem, make that uniquely German, then to, again, if we become as valuable as DAX 40 is, to also have the societal place that we then need to take.
Super.
How about you, Dan? Uniquely German.
Okay. I'm going to say something maybe that doesn't entirely make sense. So I'll give the little context of I grew up all over the world on 4 continents. I never lived in a country for more than 2 to 3 years. So honestly, I find the idea of nations as just a concept a little bit outdated. And so what I'm about to say is not about nation specific, but really what I love is that every place is uniquely gifted. And rather than imitation or substitution, we really should be talking about collaboration. I would love to see a global supply chain for startups. So rather than Munich trying to be Silicon Valley, or Silicon Valley trying to compete with Shanghai, or Shanghai trying to compete with what's happening in Bangalore, I'd love if we shared the supply chain of startups. For example, for a long time, I lived in Ireland, like where those guys are from, and I think Dublin and Cork are fantastic for trying things out. Small cities, very supportive, and it's a great place to just start. Because honestly, if I try to build a business in the US, to be number 1, a national player, whoa, that could be a lifetime. To be number 1 supplier in in Ireland, that's much faster. And with that credibility, you can expand. Right. And then the next step is somewhere on mainland Europe, right? And you grow. So I'd love to see a supply chain, because I do see a lot of, I think, wrong comparison of, oh, the VC market is in this city, and now we need more of a VC market. I'm going, why? Maybe the environment is better for VCs there, and let's bring them and pass them over. So that would be kind of my thoughts on it. Is not where is Germany stronger or weaker, but where is it uniquely gifted? What can it do that no one else can do?
For sure.
So that people show up for that moment and go, yeah, at this point in the life cycle of my startup, or if I am looking for this aspect, Germany is the no-brainer. And even Germany is such a massive country, right? So if we look at Berlin, Munich, Aachen, where I'm now doing my PhD, and all of these, they have all different vibes. And I'd love if we focus on the strengths of each place, rather than comparing and going, Silicon Valley has this concept, we should do it here. Why?
And I love that thought. That's, I mean, the way that we put it in the report also, it's an ecosystem of ecosystems, ideally, right? There's those, I mean, within Germany, these local hubs where, Berlin has a different structure than Frankfurt with a finance tech hub that's been built, and, Munich and Aachen for sure, and all the others. And then that's embedded within Europe, right? And Paris
Yes.
is always going to be different, and there's no point in trying to copy any of that. Yeah, for sure. Love it.
A few more questions have come in. We'll try it a little bit rapid fire so we can get through all of them. Does McKinsey look forward to actually investing in startups and to diversify their portfolio and be more active with startups in the future? Yes or no?
The latter question, of course, a yes. The moat we can talk about offline.
Okay, excellent.
It's an invitation, by the way, to whoever wrote that.
Excellent. It was Mayval. So, Mayval, now you know what to do. As post-COVID hiring favors lower-cost remote labor, won't high-cost labor in tax regions like Germany be at a disadvantage?
Wow, that's a big one. I don't think so.
Okay.
Because quite honestly, I mean, of course, there's the point of remote work and the point of, potentially that posing a difficulty for countries. But I don't believe in full remote work. I mean, it's great that we have that and that we also can talk, to all of you here virtually, but I also believe it's great that, out there's people and we can have lunch together and whatnot. So I think it's always going to be a combination. A, and B, it's also, there's also the reverse effect. What we've seen in Germany is that with COVID and with the fact that everyone realized that you don't need to fly to the Silicon Valley just to take a meeting with a VC, there's a lot more money flowing into Germany because investment has just been, made so much easier. So it's about, grabbing the chances and the opportunities, and then we can deal with the rest.
One more. Can one apply directly for a position in McKinsey's startup/leap division? Or do you always have to start at a general role?
That depends on what you, I know it's going to get a bit technical, but also feel free to reach out. Yes and no. If you want to be what we call integrative consultant, then typically you'd be in a generalist pool. But we do hire more and more, for instance, user interface designers, developers, back-end, front-end, whatnot. And then that's, of course, specialized positions that just do Leap, which is our business building practice, Fuel, which is our startup practice.
Super. Last question, Toby, to our online audience filled with entrepreneurs and ecosystem players, and to our in-person audience that are competing today. Last piece of advice, ways to engage with the report or with McKinsey itself?
Well, ways to engage with the report, it's up there. Ways to engage with us or with McKinsey, very easy, shoot me an email. I'm sure we can sort of make that appear somewhere. Otherwise, it's just my name _ last name at mckinsey.com. And honestly, the encouragement is let's just make this happen. The numbers are high in there, the stakes are high. I honestly believe we do need this transformation, given how much is changing in the world. So the encouragement is to, whatever way and whatever message in the report, if you do read it, which I, would love to see, whatever resonates with you, go at it, make it your mission, and then, jointly we can make this happen.
Absolutely. I mean, the benefit of consulting companies is this beautiful bird's eye view of what is happening. But ultimately, every player has to do their part to make this a reality.
For sure.
Someday, we should look back on the report in 2030 and go, wow, this actually happened. And that is not something...
I'd love to look next year if we have the development, not just in 2030 when,
There we go.
Let's do that.
Excellent. So, online audience, thank you for joining us. Toby, thank you for sharing this wealth of information.
Thanks, Dan.